moving on, and again, building and also crossing over a little bit now, more out of the microbial into the more sort of technological technique, and also it's into a category that we didn't really touch on at the last symposium, which is also the gluten-free sector. And so Ali Zeitz has been working. We met a number of years ago at Drexel at the chefs conference they have up there, where Ali assisted me in doing some demos, and we got to work together. And then after that, she moved into taking charge of the food lab at Drexel, where they get to do some very innovative, creative things for the purpose of creating products for the industry that can be licensed out and used. So it's kind of like a think tank, which is a job a lot of us would love to have. So I'm going to let her explain what she's been working on. You know that she's not exclusively a gluten-free person, but she came up with something in the gluten-free sector, and we thought this is a great way to transition and talk about that category. And then I'll let you take the Q&A with her, and we'll see where it all leads. So Ali, you're on. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I feel a little like I shouldn't be here, but I'm happy that I am. And I have a background as a traditional baker, but I'm going to talk to you today about gluten-free baking, and particularly a gluten-free croissant or gluten-free laminated dough. While I was thinking about what I was going to say at this presentation, I was thinking about the first time that I made a laminated dough, and it was in my mom's kitchen when I was in high school. And I told her, I was reading the Williams-Sonoma baking book. I don't know where I got it from, but that's what I had. And I said, I want to make puff pastry. And my mom was like, why would you want to do that? You can buy it at the grocery store. It's going to take you all day, and you're going to waste all your time. But I was like, no, I want to do it. So I made a giant mess in her kitchen, rolling out butter on her granite countertops with nothing in between. And but then I laminated my dough. It took me all day. And I made 4 apple turnovers. And my mom ate 2 out of 3. And I remember 2 out of 4. And I just remember them being perfect and being so proud of myself. And I always remind her of this story whenever I talk about my croissants, just because I think it's funny, and I like to kind of remind her to always believe in your kids, you know. So with that said, I know how to use this thing. Okay. So I love gluten. I was a traditional baker at a restaurant in Philadelphia that had a bakery. And I always, in my job at the food lab, I always try to get the baking projects just because I love them and I love working with dough. We also have a mill at Drexel, so I mill our own whole wheat flour. And I love all types of bread, probably way more than I should. But that being said, I respect and understand the challenges that go into gluten-free baking. And a gluten-free baking project, this project, landed on my desk at the Drexel Food Lab, and I thought, I don't really know if I can do that or not. But I like a challenge, so I said, I'll try it out. I'll try a little bit. And here we are. So I'm going to first just give a little bit of background on Drexel and how I ended up in this role doing this project and our various other projects, just because I think it's important to the story. I'm from Drexel University in the Center for Food and Hospitality Management. We're in the College of Nursing and Health Professions, which is a little strange, but that's where nutrition is. We're a research university, but we're also different because we have culinary arts and food science. And that's kind of how my role happened in the food lab, to really bring research to the culinary world and to a research university. We're a very small program. We're definitely not at Johnson & Wales. We have only a couple students, but we're really interested in giving those students that we have great experiences while they're with us. And I run our Drexel Food Lab. At the top, for those of you that work at Parados, that's Alex Reyes, your graduate trainee. She worked with me in the food lab, and I'm happy now that she's with Parados. And what we do is culinary research, culinary innovation, product development, recipe development, really showing our students different avenues in the industry, and that being a restaurant chef is wonderful and being a baker is wonderful, but there's also a huge world of the food industry, and we really try to show them that. We focus on healthy products. I don't know if you can classify a gluten-free croissant as a healthy product, but it is an inclusive product that we try to make products that are available to everybody, no matter what that means to them. We work with a variety of people, And one of the most important, not most important, but the one that I'm going to be talking about today is a project with Brulee Bakery, which is a small bakery in Philadelphia. She works out of her house, started the bakery herself, and she's the one that approached me about the gluten-free croissant. So when Leela first approached me, she actually wanted a vegan, gluten-free brioche. And I thought to myself, eggs, milk, butter, and flour. Those are the 4 things that make brioche, and I can't use any of those 4, which I thought was a little bit crazy. I tried one day, and I was like, I'm just going to do this once. I had a summer intern from a high school who wanted to learn about culinary. She was with me, and we tried, and it was like, it just didn't work. And I thought, okay, I could work on this forever, or we could think about another project. So I kind of pushed that one aside. I might go back to that one now, knowing that what I've learned about these croissants. But what she approached me about after I told her that I couldn't do her brioche was a gluten-free croissant. And I thought that was really interesting because when I was a baker, I laminated a ton of croissant dough and Queen Amande dough by hand at the bakery, about 500 croissants a day while I was working. So I was really comfortable making croissants. And the experience that I had with gluten-free was not a lot. I made the typical brownies, cookies, cakes. They were fine, nothing out of the ordinary. When I was working at the restaurant, we made a gluten-free bread. It had a ton of butter in it and a ton of oil and milk, and it was a batter. And that was the only experience that I had with gluten-free. And all the gluten-free recipes that I knew of were batters. So I thought, can you even make a dough out of gluten-free flour? Does that even work? Will it react the same way in the oven? So my first thought was that I was going to be laminating a batter. I don't know why, but that's what I thought. Turns out it's not like that. It is a dough, but the first time I made it was a very crumbly dough. So here are 2 pictures of the first croissants that I've made. You can see the far one from me. You can't see any layers. It's very crumbly and dry looking. There's lots of cracks, and that was pretty typical of my first batches. Both of these were baked in the traditional sense of how you bake a traditional croissant. Hot in the oven, because you typically want that poof. That happens with oven spring. The picture that's closer to me, you can see that there's a big opening in the croissant, that it almost exploded on itself in the oven. And that was pretty typical of the first croissants that I made. I realized that there's no elasticity in the dough, there's no gluten in the dough, and there's no gluten to help with the oven spring. And that's really what kind of made me start thinking about how can I change this? What can I do to make these croissants react the same way, in a different way, but with the same results as a traditional croissant? Let me just check. Okay. Yeah. So then I embarked on months of making lots of gluten-free croissants. I would make them 10 at a time, 5 days a week, while working on our various other projects. But this was really my passion project last year. There's so many variables that go into making laminated doughs or croissants. I chose to pick croissants as my holy grail. If I could get croissants, I could get any other laminated dough product. So I started testing each thing, trying different flours, trying different ingredients, trying different proofing, laminating, how many folds do I do, how hot do I bake them, how low do I bake them. And one day, the croissant gods and the gluten-free gods were looking down on me, and I created a flaky product that didn't explode in the oven, and I was like, oh my goodness, what did I do? I don't know. So then I embarked on the journey of what did I do that day? And that was months and months, and I eventually figured it out with lots of persistence. And the croissants that I'm gonna show you today use all the traditional ingredients of a croissant. Milk, sugar, some acid, yeast, Flour, gluten-free flour. I use cup for cup just because I have plenty of other things to worry about that I didn't make my own flour blend for this. Salt and lots of butter. I use European style butter. And then it's the traditional lamination. I do 3 folds. I find that that's what works best for these. If you do too many folds, it's easier for the butter to just soak into the flour. Traditional proofing. I don't change anything about the proofing. I proof them less than you can proof a traditional croissant, but they can sit in the walk-in overnight and they're perfectly fine. And then I made lots of mistakes when it comes to the baking. One day, it was during our winter term, which is after Christmas for us at Drexel. It was a Friday, and I made my dough. I made 4 doughs the night before to save myself some time. It happened to be the first day of our academic bistro, which is where our students cook lunch. It was the first day of that, which means lunch should take an hour. It took more like 2.5 hours. So I was distracted from my proofing schedule and my baking schedule. And because I was distracted, my oven got taken over by someone at the culinary school, and my 400-degree oven was actually at 200 degrees. And I was like, well, I'll just turn it up and put them in the oven and we'll see what happens without letting it preheat. But what I found that day was that I had the best croissants that I made the whole time in the months that I was testing. And that's when I really realized that gluten-free croissants are totally different than traditional croissants. They might have the same ingredients, they might have the same lamination, but they're different in the oven. No gluten means no elasticity and no way for the product to expand in the oven. So what I found was that I needed to control the oven spring. I needed to control how the croissants were baking in the oven. I needed to shape them super loose, almost not together at all, so that they would have room to expand once they were in the oven. I realized that I didn't need to bake them hot and get the oven spring. I needed just a touch of oven spring so that the butter would melt and form the layers, but not destroy my croissants. I needed just enough temperature to caramelize them without going too high and making them too dark or making too much oven spring. And then I realized that gluten-free flour doesn't absorb liquid the same way that wheat flour does. It needs to be hydrated much longer, which is interesting what Nathan was saying yesterday about using nixtalinized corn because it's already hydrated. So I let my dough hydrate for a long time so that the dough doesn't absorb all my butter once it's in the oven. As you can see, my first picture didn't have any layers because all the butter was absorbed. And that's really what I found was that you need to control the oven spring, but also dry out the croissants. They need to be almost dehydrated, not oven spring and cooked fast. They could cook, these little ones cooked for an hour. Big ones can cook even longer, which provides its own challenge, but I think that that's what, and I'm not in the commercialization. I'm in the making the best product that I can in my little lab. So that's what I found when making these gluten-free croissants. And this is the after, which I'll pass them out so you can try them. So they're kind of heavy. So these have been shipped from Philadelphia. So they're a little bit, most of them lost their top layer in transportation, so I'm sorry. But I think that they're still good to taste, and you can still see the layers and how, I think that they have good flavor. But what I was going for was the layers, being able to see the layers and not having cracks of explosion happening in the oven. And that's kind of what I was hoping for. So I made tons of croissants. I haven't had this many people try them. So I'm interested, no, like all at once. So I'm really interested to hear what you think. And I just would love to hear what you think. So I'm still obviously working on these. I think that they're good enough for you guys to taste and to give me feedback. But I think that I made 250 for this, which was a big project for me and my rolling pin. But I think that I would love to hear feedback. I'm pretty far from being able to commercialize it, and that's not what I do in my lab. So there's still work that needs to be done. I still need to perfect the recipe. One thing that I do want to talk about is that we filed a patent on this process that I talked to you about, which I could talk about in a whole nother presentation, all the challenges doing that. But I think that filing a patent on this product, it's for gluten-free laminated doughs as a whole category, is a really interesting development for the food industry in general. When I was doing this last year, all of my colleagues were like, but it's a recipe. And I'm like, nope, it's a process. You can look at my ingredients and it's the same. You wouldn't be able to tell what I did. And that's what I learned through this patent process. That's what makes it patentable. So right now it's a provisional patent. We're probably going to file as a full patent to the patent office soon, which I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that goes well. I've never done it before. Neither has any of my colleagues. So it's definitely a learning process in and of itself. Beyond this product, once we get it in a good spot, I would definitely like to work on other gluten-free products. Maybe I'll go back to that gluten-free brioche. I don't know if it'll be vegan, but maybe it'll just be gluten-free. And then one of the things that I really want to touch on too is just how much the gluten-free community really needs us traditional bakers to help them. Thing that I've found in tasting other gluten-free products made by gluten-free bakers, not Charles over there, but is that I think that people think it's gluten-free and therefore it's not going to be as good. And if you get a gluten-free product to a point where it's good, maybe the first croissants that I showed you, they're good, but are they great? Absolutely not. And I think that gluten-free bakers kind of stop at that point. They're like, you know what, it's gluten-free, that's why it's not good. And I think that it's important for everybody to kind of push each other forward and say, you know what, we can make this better together. And that's really what I'm hoping for with this croissant and working with the gluten-free community in general, is how to make better products, thinking outside the box, and really observing what happens in the gluten-free process of baking. So you're all tasting them. I hope that they're crisp and flaky, and that they haven't been too destroyed in my shipping. They are denser than traditional croissants, and I do acknowledge that. I haven't really thought of a way to combat that yet, mainly because I think it's just the way that's going to be. But I'm pretty proud of the flakiness and the crispness and the fact that they can hold up in the oven. And I think that that's the main part of this gluten-free croissant that is different from others that are out there. I know that you can taste the cup-for-cup flour. It has a distinct flavor. I have used other brands as well, but I think that for me, working through all these other obstacles has been a challenge in and of itself. So, you know, I have had gluten-free. So when I'm in my lab, I have a bunch of wheat eaters being like, it doesn't taste good, it tastes like cup for cup. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's what it is. And gluten-free people, I think, are more understanding of that flavor because they're used to it. And the celiacs that I've had taste this have been completely impressed and not said anything about the flour flavor.
Ali, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
When you were, the earlier photos looked like they were like almost full-size croissants, and I know for today you made mini croissants so we could get everyone a sample. Do you find that they bake and perform differently depending on the size?
So yes, I never made this many mini croissants. And when I was shaping them, I thought that I would make them smaller than what most of you have, but I realized that they don't have the structure to be as small as I personally wanted them to be. They need a little bit more, they need to be bigger than what you think they need to be. But if you're doing a traditional croissant size, it works perfectly fine. And the whole baking process is the same with these. It's just harder to get the structure to be not as like wobbly or fall over type.
For the smaller ones?
For the smaller ones.
Harder for the smaller
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And feedback. I would either personally after, I would love to hear feedback on this product. I mean, again, it's still being developed. I think it's in a good spot. I think it could be better. So I would love to hear feedback on the product, feedback on gluten-free and everything.
I was curious what the flour was made of.
Cup for cup, it's cornstarch, white rice flour, brown rice flour, milk powder, xanthan gum, I think potato as well.
In fact, along that lines, in light of what Nathan was talking about yesterday and some of their discoveries in the gluten-free sector, did you get any ideas or takeaways that you could take back to the lab for that could apply possibly
Yeah.
to this product?
I thought that was really interesting what he was saying, and I think it's this gluten-free dough has to be hydrated and retard in the fridge for at least like over 12 hours, because I think what he was saying was that hydration is a factor, and I think that we as wheat bakers think of hydration but not as an essential part of baking, whereas these, if you don't hydrate the flour long enough, it's going to absorb all of the butter once it's baking, and then your layers are gone. So I think that that's really important, and I've never tried corn in this, but I would like to. I think I'm definitely going to go back and try.
Yeah, my takeaway from that yesterday was this notion of pre-gelatinized
Yeah,
starches.
yeah.
Which corn, there could be others besides
Yeah.
masa, but and that may be something, wondering about some of the ingredients company people that are here, if there's already pre-gelatinized starch products that could be
Yeah.
possibly utilized in products like this. But of course, your focus is really technique now, as far as getting the patent part has
Yeah.
to do with the methodology for baking,
Yeah.
and the tweaking can happen with the ingredients. along the
Exactly.
way.
I've tried a couple like food science ingredients or dough conditioners. None were essential to my process, and I really wanted to focus on the baking. So I had a couple dough conditioners, a dough conditioner in it, but I removed it and didn't see any difference. So I haven't gone down that bridge yet either, but that's another.
Do you want me to take questions, or do you want more to say?
That's pretty much it. Here's my contact info if you want to contact me. Visit the Food Lab website. We do a lot of different projects, this just being one of them. But thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed me.
Let's hopefully you guys have some questions for Ali, or comments or feedback, because it is like a work in progress.
Yeah,
And it is a food lab, so this is the whole point, is to try to get outside the box and come up with things that other people are not thinking about. So we're going to open the floor up. Does anybody want the mic?
Hey, first of all, thank you. As far as gluten-free croissants goes, it's the best I've had, though I can't say I've wanted to try many. And I personally have taken my shot at laminated gluten-free products, and did not go well. I made a brick. So my question is, before I came here, I was telling some people about this. They were asking me for gluten-free and vegan recipes. So if you were to take this the route vegan as well, do you have any idea how you would approach that?
I think I would use, we had a student who did a vegan bakery for a senior project, and he did croissants, and he used Earth Balance. I don't know if Earth Balance is the best option, probably not, but he had great success with that and didn't have to change his baking. So I think that's where I would start, and then explore other options. I know another baker that uses sunflower oil in his vegan breads and baked goods, so I probably would explore that. I figured once I tackled the gluten-free hurdle, I could tackle the vegan hurdle without much difference. I hope that answers your question.
You mentioned that you had a mill for milling wheat. Did you consider milling some buckwheat, rice, whatever else, all the wonderful options that there are to make your own flour?
If I had a mock mill, maybe I would.
Yes, there you go.
Because our mill is very large and it's almost impossible to clean, I have not. But I learned that yours are pretty self-cleaning.
No, I mean, these grains are readily milled, and I think it's important to suggest you to look at that rather than a prepackaged process.
I think every food lab like that ought to have some kind of a mock mill type product in there.
I think that.
But a mill. It should have
Yeah,
a mill in their labs, for sure.
I think that I would like to add different flours to it. I think that it would give it better flavor. I love buckwheat and all different grains. So that is also, I would say, with the vegan. Once I finish the baking process and kind of perfecting, I can look about introducing other flours.
Okay.
Hi. So, have you thought about then how taking the most challenging thing, right, and then applying it to teaching people about other types of gluten-free baking? I was kind of hearing the two key takeaways were long hydration time and then lower and longer baking time.
Yeah. So right now I'm focused on laminated doughs. I figured the croissants probably the hardest of the laminated doughs, so I would start with that one and work through other shapes and kind of uses. So that's what I'm doing. I would like to go into bread, and that'd be my next step of seeing if there's a lot of great gluten-free breads out there. There's not a lot of great gluten-free croissants out there. So yeah.
Question up here.
So to address the density issue, have you tried adding chemical leaveners to it, like a double acting baking powder?
I have not, but I have thought about it. I have not, just because it's not in a traditional croissant, so I haven't explored beyond that. But I should. I really should.
I don't think cup for cup is in a traditional croissant either. So
That's true.
You've got no restrictions on
I
what
know,
you're
I
doing.
know.
You're working way out of the
know.
box, which is how it should be.
Out of the box on all of our.
Yeah. And I think along those lines, the guys who invented the self-rising pizza crust, weren't restricted by the idea that pizza dough should have yeast and not baking powder.
Yeah.
So it's a great.
I think I did actually try different leaveners one in my first test, but didn't figure out the baking part, so it didn't make very much difference. So I probably should revisit that. So it's a good point.
I have a question. What is Earthbound product?
Earthbound is vegan butter. You can buy it at the Whole Foods. It's like vegan butter.
Just to clarify, it's made of olive oil, isn't it?
Yeah, which is why it might not be one of the best choices, because it has a strong flavor of olive oil. What I was getting at.
There's certainly
But there's
there's vegan butters.
so many vegan butters. I think that's the first one that comes to my mind.
Did you happen to count how many batches you did to get to this point?
It was in the hundreds. Well, I did a lot of tests in the beginning, like not with very much success, and threw a lot away. I've gone through about 10, 25-pound bags of cup for cup. And then once I made a croissant that was good, and then I had to go back and figure out what I did. I made hundreds then. So I've made quite a bit. Quite a bit.
I think it's a great case for perseverance and exploration, just trial and error.
Yeah, trial and error, and not listening to your colleagues, so I would say, who tell you that it's not good, you should just stop. Or all of our students are like, "You're making gluten-free croissants again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yes I am. This is what it is." They all want to do product development, and I'm like, you have to make it until you fully understand it. And I think that that's one of the things that I really learned was taking everybody's feedback and then kind of putting it into something and not letting them bring me down.
I think wasn't it Thomas Edison who said that it takes about 1,000 tries to figure out how not to make a light bulb before he actually figured out how to do it.
One day I was making them, and my colleagues were like, it was the day of our baking class, and they were like, "This doesn't taste good. This isn't good." And I was like, maybe I should stop. And then one of my other colleagues who works in institutional advancement, it was gluten-free and is celiac, and she came. I was like, I need help. I need a gluten-free person to give me their feedback. And she cried. Like, she bawled in my office, and I was like, you know what? I got to keep going. Wheat bakers, you're great, but I got to keep going for the gluten-free people.
One thing that I was thinking as you were talking about letting the dough, rest in the refrigerator for 12 hours, at least 12 hours, and I could compare it a little to, for myself, working with our pastry flours that are whole grain or, high extraction, and it seems like, I laud you for the work you're doing on the gluten-free, but it seems like you could also have a lot to say towards whole grain pastry and laminate, because I know Jeffrey Yankelo has been working on, the whole wheat croissants or high extraction croissants, and I love to see you guys sharing it, because I feel like there might be a crossover there.
Yeah, when I mill at Drexel, it's not fine flour at all. I don't normally sift. It's normally pretty coarse, so it's a good point. I don't normally put those two together, but I normally help our students when they're going from commercialized flour to our milled flour. It's different, and they need to account for that. So yeah, I don't normally think of them as the same, but yeah.
Yeah, this one over there. Mic over there. Yeah. You're right, Thank you.
I'm quite sure I'm the only gluten-free baker in the room. I want to congratulate you for coming up with these, and thank you for being brave enough to get up in front of this
And
audience.
before you, for those who don't know Charles, if you have an interest in this area, please talk to him between the breaks, because I've used his mixes and tasted his bread over the for at least 5-6 years. I've been eating your bread, and he makes a great product. So
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Just wanted to find out if I would be welcome to come visit your lab.
Of course, of course.
Also wanted to point out that in our breads that we make mixes and also make some breads, our least hydrated product is 93% hydration, and our pizza crust can go as high as 110 to 120% hydration.
That's
so
interesting.
you're on the right track with hydration.
Yeah.
Also, the bagels that we make, we find we have to autolyze them at least 20 minutes before the final mix, and we let them proof for 3 days in the refrigerator to get exactly the quality that we want. So you're absolutely on the right track about hydration. Thank you again for coming up.
Thank you.
With us. I appreciate that.
thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
And yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of and going back to the question of developing new products, as some of you who have worked in food labs like this know, that a lot of times the innovation is driven by a request from somebody who needs a product, like in this case, or is willing to fund it, or in other words, there has to be an end in mind where it can monetize. Otherwise, you have to get foundation grants and all sorts of other things to fund it. So a lot of times it's started by somebody in a commercial side saying, "Can you do this for us? Can you be can we be a client of yours?"
To your point, this project started with a gluten-free bakery in Philadelphia, but it's really kind of moved past that, and we still need somebody to produce this. Like, I'm not going to produce it in my lab. I don't know if I'm going to leave my job to produce gluten-free croissants, but I am actively looking for a partner to produce this and utilize this technology. In my lab, I make a lot of stuff, and it's very seldom that it gets made into a real product. So, and that's really my goal in this, is sharing about it and then hopefully finding the right person to make it for us.
Any final questions, comments, thoughts? If not, allow me to present Ali with a knife from J.A. Henkel's. If I thought about this, I would have had them all engraved for you. But we appreciate the fact that they've given us these knives to give us gifts and as a nice memento for your work here. And again, this will not only be a conversation worth having during lunch, but it carries over now into the next round. We have two very important presentations in the afternoon to wrap the symposium up with us as we move more now into both technology and how craft and technology come together. So Marcus Mariathis will be speaking. Last year, for those again who were here, we remember the phrase from craft to scale became one of the takeaway phrases, and we start to see across the country this idea, this notion of, can you replicate the high quality artisan, the influence of the artisan movement, can it be done at scale? There are bakeries that are doing that. And so Marcus, who's an award-winning baker and heading an award-winning bakery, is going to talk about some of the things that they've learned along the way. And then we will wrap up today with Stanley Ginsberg addressing one of the challenging but hot topics of the day, which is rye. Rye is it's back. Rye is back in a big way, and to a great extent because of the work that Stanley's done through his books, and yet it has its challenges. So we're going to see, those of you who are coming to the workshop tomorrow will be working with some rye, some polycrop, a lot of these new flours, some of the flours that Jennifer was talking about yesterday. They have their challenges, and that's what that workshop is about. Stanley's going to address some of that in his presentation today, and he'll actually be there tomorrow at Harry Paymuller's workshop to answer other questions for those of you who are following up and coming to that. With that, let me remind you again that Shai Farshad will be doing a demo during lunch, so feel free to kind of observe and come in and out on that. Enjoy lunch. We are going to reconvene back here at 2 p.m., so you have a nice long lunch break and relax. But don't get too relaxed. Come back, have a shot of iced tea or something because we have two powerful presentations at the end. Thank you. Have a great lunch.